Did you know that over 70% of home builders make at least one major mistake during their first tiny house DIY project? That's a lot of frustrated folks out there. But don't worry, we're gonna go over the 7 most common mistakes that DIYers make, and more importantly, how to avoid them so that you can build your dream tiny home without breaking a sweat. Let's jump right in. Now, building a tiny home might look simple on Instagram or TikTok, but the reality is there are a lot of things that can go sideways in a hurry if you're not careful. We've seen people get halfway through a build only to realize they've missed something crucial, like planning for their plumbing system or underestimating the weight of their structure. The result? A lot of wasted time and money, and nobody wants that. So, let's break down the most common pitfalls and make sure that you don't end up in the same boat. Let's dive into the top 7 most common DIY mistakes and how to avoid them.
Welcome back to the Tiny House Experts channel. Today, we're covering 7 common DIY mistakes that can turn your tiny home project into a big headache. Whether you're a newbie or you've been at this for a while, these tips are going to save you a ton of time, money, and frustration. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's make sure you're set up for success.
All right, let's dive into the 7 top mistakes and how you can avoid them. Mistake number 1, underestimating weight capacity. And this is a huge one. I can't stress it enough. Every trailer has a specific weight capacity, and exceeding it can cause major safety issues and even legal problems. I've seen it happen too often where someone builds a beautiful tiny home, but they didn't account for the weight of all the materials, appliances, and furniture. The trailer tires start sagging, the suspension screaming, and the next thing you know, they're in a costly and dangerous situation. The key here is to do your homework. Calculate the weight of every component, wood, metal, windows, appliances, everything, and make sure it all fits within the trailer's capacity. And don't forget to factor in the people who will be living there as well as their belongings. Use lighter materials wherever possible. For example, using light gauge steel framing instead of traditional wood lumber to shave off some unwanted pounds. It's strong and durable, but much lighter. Always plan for some wiggle room because once you start building, little things add up quickly.
Mistake number 2, ignoring insulation. Insulation might not be the most glamorous part of your build, but it's absolutely crucial. I've seen people try to save a few bucks by skimping on insulation, and they end up regretting it in every season. If you don't have the right insulation, your tiny home can turn into a sauna in the summer and a freezer in the winter. Solution: you need to choose the right insulation for your climate. If you're in a colder region, go for closed cell spray foam or rigid foam insulation. They're more expensive, but they seal out the moisture and provide excellent thermal resistance. In warmer climates, you might get away with fiberglass or even sheep wool, which is eco-friendly and effective. Also, don't forget about the floor and ceiling. Heat rises, so a poorly insulated roof can be a big problem. And for those really extreme climates, consider a double wall system for added insulation.
Mistake number 3, poor plumbing planning. Plumbing is one of those things people tend to overlook until it's too late. Trust me, you don't want to be ripping up your beautiful floors or walls because you forgot to plan out your plumbing system properly. A poorly designed plumbing system can lead to leaks, water damage, and a whole lot of unneeded expense and frustration. Start by mapping out your entire plumbing system before you even pick up a hammer. Think about where your water supply and waste lines will go. Will you be on-grid or off-grid? Are you using a composting toilet or a traditional one? These decisions affect everything from your floor plan to the materials you use. Use PEX tubing for its flexibility and durability, and make sure you have easy access points for maintenance. And one more thing. Install a pressure reducing valve if you're hooking up to city water. Tiny homes usually have smaller pipes, and city water pressure can be too much for them, causing leaks or damage.
Mistake number 4, weatherproofing and sealing issues. Water is the enemy of any home, but especially a tiny home. One small leak can lead to big problems like mold, rot, and structural damage. One of the most common places for water to sneak in is where the trailer meets the tiny home structure. If you don't seal this area properly, you're going to have a bad time. Solution: to prevent this, we use custom flashing between the trailer and the wall system. This prevents water from entering at the most vulnerable spot. We also use sill seal under the subfloor sheathing. This material helps prevent rot by acting as a barrier between the steel floor joists and the wood subfloor, keeping condensation from becoming an issue. Remember, water runs downhill and will find any entry point it can. Make sure you're flashing, caulking, and sealing every seam and corner. Your tiny home needs to be as tight as a drum to keep water out.
Mistake number 5, not researching local codes. Building codes and zoning laws are the kind of thing that can really sneak up on you. I've seen folks put their heart and soul into building a tiny home, only to find out they can't legally live in it where they intended. Some places don't allow tiny homes at all, and others have strict rules about everything from minimum square footage to utility hookups. Before you start designing your tiny home, check with your local building department. Find out what the regulations are for tiny homes, RVs, or accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs. Some areas are more flexible, while others have pretty strict rules. It's better to know up front what you're dealing with so you can design accordingly. And if you're planning to be mobile, remember that different states have different laws. You might be legal in one state to live in your tiny and completely out of compliance in another. So do your research and don't skip this step.
Mistake number 6, overcomplicating the design. It's easy to get carried away with your tiny home design. I get it. You want a loft, a fancy staircase, and a kitchen that would make Gordon Ramsay proud. But here's the thing. The more complex your design, the more time and money it's going to cost you, and more complexity often means more chances for something to go wrong. Solution: keep it simple, especially if this is your first build. Focus on what you really need versus what looks cool. Do you really need that loft, or could a pull-out bed work just as well? Can you use multi-purpose furniture instead of separate pieces? Think modular and flexible. Start with a basic design, and you can always upgrade or modify later as you get more comfortable with the space. The less complicated your build, the fewer things that can go wrong. And trust me, things will go wrong.
Mistake number 7, neglecting HVAC and ventilation. HVAC and ventilation are crucial in any home, but especially in a tiny one. In such a small space, moisture, odors, and temperature can get out of control quickly. I've seen people forget to include proper ventilation and end up with mold problems or poor air quality or both. And don't even get me started on trying to sleep in a tiny home with poor airflow. It's brutal. Plan your HVAC and ventilation right from the start. Consider a mini split system for heating and cooling. They're efficient and take up very little space. For ventilation, you want at least 2 sources of fresh air intake and exhaust, like a high-quality exhaust fan in the bedroom and a range hood in the kitchen. Use a heat recovery ventilator, or HRV, to circulate air without losing too much heat. And make sure your windows are strategically placed for cross-ventilation. It's also a good idea to have a dehumidifier on hand to control moisture levels, especially if you're in a humid area. The biggest takeaway here is that preparation and planning are everything in a tiny home build. Whether it's weight capacity, insulation, plumbing, weatherproofing, local codes, design, or even HVAC. Each one of these elements is crucial to building a tiny home that's both functional and comfortable. So take the time to research, double-check your plans, and consult with experts if you need to. You'll thank yourself later, I promise. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tips on tiny home living. Got a question or a story to share? Drop it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And as always, stay tiny and stay awesome. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like and button. God damn it.